This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and this is your podcast for leadership, inspiration, and impact. Of course, today will be no different. I have my friend Alana Stott in the studio with us. Well, I should say the virtual studio today, because she's out in California, much nicer weather than we have here in Wisconsin. But let me give Alana the proper introduction before we get into conversation. Alana Stott is a trailblazing entrepreneur, author, producer, and philanthropist. Philanthropist, you can say that word, right? With a career spanning security, finance, media, and global activism, from running high-stakes security operations to raising millions for charities like Heads Together. With the support of Prince Harry, she has made a lasting impact in multiple industries. She founded Wolf Raven Omni Media to share powerful, purpose-driven stories and is a fierce advocate against human trafficking. Her work in philanthropy, I'm going to say that word right today at some point, philanthropy, mental health awareness, and supporting vulnerable women earned her the Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, MBE, in the King's 2023 honor list, which we'll have to explain that a little bit, Alana, because most of us Americans have zero clue what that is, but we'll get into that a little bit as well. Alana's career is a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the power of taking on challenges head on. Alana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get into that. What is the Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire?
So you're asking me, I don't really know that much myself, but it's every year, I think twice a year, the king, now used to be the queen, would give awards to people from various walks of life. The MBE, there's the MBE, OBE, and then there's the Sir and Dames and all these other ones. But the MBE is generally given to just ordinary people who just do things that are, I guess, a bit out of
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And it's got to be a great honor for you. And it's just like we have awards here in America that, mean certain things to certain people. And I figured I'd ask you about that as well, because it's just something that most of us would never hear unless we came from the UK ourselves. So most of you, go ahead.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say, most of us listening got to hear her husband, Dean, a couple months ago, I think it was, that we had Dean on, and that was released. And I wanted to have Alana on because she is extra special as well. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot to supporting someone like Dean on the back end. And then we'll get into a lot of what Alana's done with some of her philanthropy. See, got the word right this time. And some of her entrepreneurial efforts as well. But I wanted to get in a little bit conversation-wise with you, Alana, because when I was interviewing Dean, I'm like, this has got to be a hell of a woman to support you being gone, not only for the British Special Forces, but also the bike ride that took just under 100 days, and all the philanthropy and hard work and raising money for men's, I think, mental health, may not be just men's, and being without him, the father, the husband, for that long. And so I wanted to conversate with you, on your end of things. What is it like to be, without your husband, whether it be in military operation or with the bike ride or anything else on that day-to-day basis? What type of mental strength and how do you carry on your day-to-day knowing that he's going to be gone for those periods of time?
Well, I grew up very independently anyway. So my upbringing, I spent large amounts of time on my own as a child, and then my life was always dictated by myself. Like the buck stopped with me constantly. So when I met Dean, funny enough, I'd never actually been in a real relationship when I met Dean, because I just didn't have time. Career was everything to me, and probing business and philanthropy was all my passion. So relationships weren't really, I didn't have much time for it. And then I met Dean, and I can tell he was somebody different. He was somebody who had the mindset that I'd kind of always been looking for, the can-do attitude, the nothing's impossible kind of belief set. And then, but I knew what he'd done. I knew he was in the Special Forces, and I knew that he was going to go away. But I grew up in Aberdeen in Scotland, which was the oil and gas capital of Europe. So most of the men there were on like rotation, were away 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. There was always people coming and going anyway. So I knew that from my grandmother and friends that I had, that was a lifestyle. It wasn't really a lifestyle that I was bothered by either way, because I had my own life anyway. So I knew that when I met Dean that this was the life that he had. But then he was injured quite quickly into our relationship. So we had to get him back to some sort of strength. And then he was in the private security world. And the private security world probably took him away more than anything else. I think 1 year he was home 21 days. But I think because independently I was good on my own. And yeah, I had a lot of friends who had what I'll call like a normal life. They would tell me, he needs to get a job at home. He needs to support you at home. He needs to be here for the kids and you. And I was like, that works for you, but I didn't marry that guy. I didn't marry the 9-to-5 guy. I knew who he was when I met him. And for me to ask him to be someone different just would have been an injustice to who he was. And we did try it for a very small period of time where he worked with me in property development, and he was home and he would come into meetings and he was just glazed over. You could just see the life slowly draining from him. So someone like Dean needs to be in the thick of it, in the action, in adrenaline pumping atmospheres. And if he's not, he becomes a little bit of a shadow of himself. So for that, I have to make sure that I can build a life that doesn't need Dean to be there constantly. And that's what we've done.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's there's so much wisdom in what you just said, because we got to support each other as husband and wife and support each other's dreams, and also learn those instances when they're not them true selves. So as you know, Dean and I got to speak earlier today, and I was telling him, I was like, Dean, people like you and we're largely unemployable. We got to do our own thing. And so the 9-to-5 world does not work out for people like Dean and I. And unfortunately, he found you. Unfortunately, I found my wife, Jenna, that support us in our dreams and our crazy ventures and sometimes crazy ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lot of communication as well. And I know that word gets bandied about a lot as, you must communicate as a couple, but communication isn't just finding that agreement. It's having that arguments and saying, actually, I'm not doing what I want to do. I'm not fulfilling my dream. Or on the reverse, saying to them, like, you're not doing what you're meant to be doing. And you can see that when a person isn't living their purpose or their dreams, you can see that life kind of going from them. So it's important that you get to see the best version of the person you met when they're living to their fullest extent. So in both ways, you need to make sure that's working.
Oh, that's such a good addition. So let's go to that cycling ride real quick, because you handled all the back end stuff for that. So for those that didn't get a chance to listen to Dean and I's episode, he set the world record for the Pan American Highway, which goes from you start either at the tip of Alaska, go to the tip of South America, or start like Dean did at the tip of South America and go to the tip of Alaska. And you were fundraising behind the scenes for mental health and the operations for the ride, and staying in communication with him. What was that? Was that your first venture into fundraising? Was that your...
I mean, my first, I think I was about 8 years old when I done the first like sponsored famine or something like that. So I've always been in some sort of philanthropic world of some description, whether it's volunteering or whether it's raising money. But this was the biggest project we'd ever taken on, because it was a logistical project, planning, there was fundraising, there was so much involved in it. There was actually, because as you said earlier, Prince Harry had asked us to raise the money for his nonprofit Heads Together. There was 11 charities that fell under that. So we had to manage all these charities who were coming together in this collaborative effort. And then we had them working with Prince Harry was a challenge in itself, because that comes with media, more bad than good, unfortunately. But so we had teams to put together, we had kit to get together, the logistics, where we were, so you're coming from, as you've said, Argentina right up, you've got things like the Darien Gap in the middle, so we had to plan. That kept changing too, because Panama and Colombia were falling out in the middle of it. Then we had civil wars in Nicaragua, and we had weather patterns to plan for. There was just so much involved in it that what we had to do was try and take as much of that away from Dean as we possibly could, so he could concentrate on being fit and riding the bike. And the more he can just concentrate on that side of it, and the more we could take away all the logistics and planning, the better we knew that it was going to be, and he could do what he was good at.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think you're downplaying a lot of it's hard to in a short conversation, but there's so much logistical planning that goes into that with all those different countries in South America. Where did you guys go for the vast majority of the charity building? Was it through TV? Was it through media? Was it through phone calls to big donors? Like, how did you guys go about? Because for those that didn't listen, again, they raised over $1 million in just that 100 days. And that's a huge feat.
Yeah, we had to start with funding the operation to start with. So that was going to cost quite a bit just to get him across those borders. There was 14 borders we were crossing. So and then the kit and the bikes and all these different things. So the first thing we needed was a sponsor just to cover those types of costs. And I was actually developing a student accommodation at the time, and one of the builders I was working with mentioned someone's name, and I said, could I get an introduction to this person? They were a wealth management company. And then I spoke to this person, and then I kept trying to get in touch with the kind of big cheeses of the company so that I could really get down with them. And they were based in London. And actually, funnily enough, I got a call from while we were down in London. It was a casual day. I was wearing like a pink jumper and white jeans. It was super casual. And the CEO of this huge wealth management company called and said, could you come in now? And we were like, oh, like, first impressions, like. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And we went in, and it was just the pitch was ready. I already had the pitch ready. I'd already prepared it. So yes, my dress wasn't the best, but I was able to just go in and pitch to them. And they pretty much on that day, they pretty much told us, yeah, you've got it. And they gave us £500,000 just to start with, just to get everything moving and get the logistics going. And then from there, they helped us plan another event, which we raised another $250,000 at that event. And then it was just constant emailing, contacting people, having meetings. I met with one lady who on International Women's Day, and she had the possibility of a 75,000 donation. I ended up meeting with her over some wine. We had a really great conversation, and from that we ended up with 150,000. So a lot of it was like huge, chunky donations. Where we struggled was actually the kind of public funding donations, and the reason behind that was that Dean literally showed no emotion during training, during the actual ride, and then he was just going for it. It didn't look like he was in any form of pain. He didn't look like he was struggling. So people weren't donating. We needed, I was like, I need you to cry, or I need you to look like you're hurting in some sort of way. But he just wouldn't do it, and his little stoic little self just carried on. So most of it was coming from larger funding from larger corporates and things, but we did get a bit in the public donation side. But literally, if you cried, I would have got more.
Get that stoic warrior to cry. That's a tough task. But I wanted you to go into that because not only do I do fundraising for charities here, but I know there's a lot of people that listen that have, like Americans have some unbelievable hearts, and they're very passionate about the charities that they donate to or spend time with. And there's so much groundwork that goes into, selling the dream and selling the mission of the charitable causes, because especially here in America, we have so many options. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but like in America, like there's millions of charities. And so there's a lot of groundwork and a lot of conversations that lead to nowhere and salesmanship that has to go on with it to be able to raise those dollars.
Yeah, I always say to treat it like a business, because the problem that philanthropy is it normally does come from a really strong heart. Normally a founder of a charity, it's for a reason. Maybe their kid had cancer, or they were a veteran, or there's a reason they've set up that particular cause. And they're really passionate about it. And when you're super passionate about something like that, instantly think everybody else should be passionate about it. You don't like my huge passion is human trafficking, and when other people don't care about it, I'm like, why don't you care about it? This is super important, but it just might not be important to that other person you're talking to. So you have to flip it over and make it into a business. Like, just like if you were pitching for investment in your business, you're maybe not necessarily going to lean fully on whatever that business might be, whether it's, you know, tech or wellness, whatever industry it's in. You are talking about that industry, but you're mainly talking about the numbers. You're saying, look, this is what it is, this is what it's going to be worth, this is how many years it's going to take us to get there, this is what your ROI is going to be. You're doing the same thing with philanthropy and donors. You're basically pitching them a business plan, and you can't just go in just fully on the heart side of it. You have to kind of what's in it for them, what can they get out of it. And yeah, there won't be maybe a financial ROI, but there's going to be something that they're going to get back that you really have to be pushing towards them to show them. So I always just say treat it like a business.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Well, let's dive into a little bit about the human trafficking, because I know that's a passion of yours. You have a charity that you've started behind it. What was your impetus to become such a strong voice in the fight against human trafficking?
Well, when I was younger, my mom passed away when I was pretty young, and I experienced some things as a teenager. I had some unfortunate incidences. And one of them was where two men had sexually assaulted me, and I ended up taking them to court, and they went to jail. But during the process of that, I learned a lot about how a victim of sexual assault is treated. I was 17, going through the court system and dealing with lawyers and dealing with all these different things, and that was a pretty horrible experience in itself. And then working with victim advocacies, and I learned about what women and girls really went through sexual abuse wise, and that brought me into the world of trafficking, and I learned about how everything was going on there. So I was about 17 or 18 when I got into this world and just learned more about how prominent it was in the world, how lack of resources there was, lack of education, lack of awareness. And then really that carried on, I guess, up until I met Dean. And at that point, I was getting more calls for people to go and rescue people. You know, things were happening and kids were at risk, and there just wasn't enough people who could help with the rescues. And then obviously Dean said he immediately wanted to help with that. So that was when we trained, both of us trained in close protection so that we could help. And then really, I mean, like 24 years later, that's us still working in the area, still fighting the fight. So.
And you've taken that fight from the UK now to the States, and you and I had a private conversation, and I spit out a very large number, and you said actually the number is even larger than that now. What is the size of the industry now of human trafficking? What is the dollar amount that it stands at today?
Yeah, the estimate right now is about 250 million. They say between 239 and 250 billion. Sorry, billion, I meant to say. With 49 to 50 million slaves in the world today. So when I was doing some research probably 14 years ago, it was about $150 billion. So in the last 10 years, it's increased by about another $100 billion, sorry.
Yeah, but that's a huge difference, the M versus the B. That's bigger than almost any industry anyone could think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's surpassed the gun trade. I would say it's either on par or just passing the drug trade now, the illegal drug trade. And I think if you look at it in figures, the U.S. Marine Corps, their budget is $49 billion. So it's kind of 5 times the size of the U.S. Marine Corps in profitability wise. So yeah, it's a huge industry with very, very huge players in the games. So to take it down, it's going to need a lot.
So let's dive into that actually, because my biggest question is like we know this exists. I think all humans know this exists, but it's like that deep dark secret we don't want to talk about because it's so ugly. And so I've had a couple people on the podcast now, including you, that have spent their a lot of their life's work in this very ugly topic. What needs to change for this to at least decrease, if not completely be eliminated?
So I think that we need to understand it in a whole 360 approach. It can't just be like, right, let's take down the traffickers, because this isn't about the traffickers. This is about a supply and demand. It's a basic economic situation. Like, they're not going to be able to be traffickers or if there isn't this huge demand. So if we just focused on the sex trafficking industry, we can't just say, let's just take out traffickers, let's just close borders, let's just stop bad people coming and doing bad things, because while there's still the demand there, there's always somebody's going to find a way to supply you. Like, there's going to be that. So we need to look at, yes, stopping the traffickers, yes, educating the victims on how to prevent themselves getting into the world, but also, like, how do we deal with this demand? You know, we're trying to fight it and it's growing, but at the same time, things like Pornhub are growing and all these other instant gratification side of the world that we're dealing with now, that everything has to be instant. We can get whatever we want whenever we want it, and there's no limitations anymore as to what, you know, it used to be that maybe like the porn side of the world was like the magazine on the top shelf and occasionally there was a video or something. Now it's just like you can click on any site, find anyone on there. And I always say, if we're looking at just porn in itself, you know, we used to have a number of porn stars who got paid a salary to do the work that they were doing, you know, often with a contract. Now people are able to just make videos, upload them onto these sites, and then they're out there. And a lot of the times these girls are not doing it off their own volition. They're underage. They have no idea that even these videos are being taken. And this is all trafficking. It's all part of the same thing. And I say, you know, 99% of kids that are taken, trafficked, or missing are taken by someone they know. So this whole kind of like kids are being kidnapped off the street, thrown in the back of a van, and then being trafficked, that's a bit more Hollywood. That's not exactly how it's going down. You know, they're being groomed and they're being brought into this world, and before they know it, they're in it. And the biggest issue that we have with things like law enforcement is that most of these girls don't even realize what's happening to them until it's very late, or by the time they're desensitized or addicted to drugs or whatever, it's too far gone. So they're never going to play the ideal victim. They're going to look like a very hardened person. They're going to deny that they're a victim. They're going to deny that he's trafficking them. So once we're at that stage, it's really hard to get to it. So my way of working is that we need to prevent it from happening in the first place. We need to bring education to schools, to law enforcement, to anybody who's anybody. We just need that basic understanding of what trafficking looks like, what grooming looks like, so we can just stop it happening altogether.
What percentage of pornography that people, let's say Pornhub, OnlyFans, wherever their preferred site is, what percentage of that would you estimate, or maybe you know, is trafficking versus people doing it under their own volition?
Do you know, that's not a figure that I actually know, but if I had to guess, I would definitely put it over the 80% is when I'm saying unwilling, there's going to be, when I think about somebody who's doing something off their own volition, it's okay, today, you know, maybe I'm a bit broke, maybe I'm going to go and do OnlyFans, or I'm going to go and do this, I'm going to purposely do this video or make this content, and I'm going to upload it. They're going to pay it into my bank account. I'm going to receive the money. You know, what happens after that? Any regrets? That's, you made that decision, and you've got where it's an exploitation that's taken place is, you know, maybe you meet somebody and you start dating them, and then they maybe start talking about, you know, you're the only one they can trust, and, you know, you don't need other family members. And there's a whole process of grooming that goes into isolating this individual to the point that then they're like, okay, we need to make some money, you could go and do this, you know, and then that becomes exploitation. And if you're not receiving the money, if you don't have control of your own actions, if you're doing things you don't want to do, but you're doing them to please someone else. And then there's the worst ones where it's the video's recording and that person maybe doesn't know that it's going on. or it is actual full exploitation where they are being abused and trafficked, and these videos are being allowed to be uploaded. But the problem then is that there's places like Pornhub, there's a really, really small amount of moderators. So you complain about a video being up there, 13-year-old girl's dad calls up and says, look, this is my 13-year-old daughter, get it taken off. It could take them months to get around to it. I believe right now there's something like 35 moderators in Pornhub for however many millions of videos get uploaded every day. So by the time that they stand a chance of getting that video removed, this 13-year-old girl's already been shared around the entire world and copied and reproduced, and her video is probably out there forever, and she probably stands very little chance of ever getting it removed.
So it's a good lesson. You think about that. She said about 80%. I've actually seen a stat very similar to that. For those of you that choose to engage in watching porn, there's a high likelihood that you're watching exploitation. And so I think the end user has to get right with their own soul about that.
I was chatting with a sheriff earlier this month, actually, and we were talking about that. And I don't like to deny that there's men out there that are good men that probably have gone and paid for sex. It's something that people have done. It's something that possibly people in the military, when they were away, they done. It was just something that was kind of joked about in our younger days. You go to Amsterdam, you do all this kind of stuff. But when I've spoke to guys, especially military guys, and they do admit to me that they have purchased sex, and I say that to them, I say, there is a high chance that person wasn't willing, and that was a traffic victim. Would you have still went with her if you'd known? And every time I speak to them, it is 100%. We wouldn't have done that, like 100%. And they just think that by her looking like she's willing or looking like she's actively participating, that means that they're doing it. But I would say exactly what you've said. If you think about the girl on the street, let's say that's a 90-95% chance she's not doing that off her own back. And in the likes of Pornhub and other various ones, I mean, I don't know that stat, but I would say it's about 80%. I'd say there's very few that are actually doing this out of their own volition. And even things like OnlyFans, I think that that's probably a lesser percentage. There's a little bit more verification goes into it, but that's almost like a friend's thing as well. Like, is your friend doing something that they maybe don't want to do? They started dating somebody who's making them do things. That's where those questions. But to your point, yes, there's a much, much higher chance, yes, than no, that person is being trafficked, that you're either watching or purchasing.
Yeah. The Super Bowl just happened, and you and I both know, maybe others that are listening don't know, that is the highest sex trafficking weekend of the year. And I don't have any recent stats off the top of my mind, but you think about the people that are there, it's some of the most famous, wealthy, and politically strong people in the world. And yet that's the highest time for sex trafficking to happen, is on that weekend and in that city. And go ahead. I was trying to think of a question around this, but I was thinking about stats and thinking about why that is the case.
It is a tough one because I definitely try not to focus on the Super Bowl and the various things like that, because it does almost make it sound like it's just happening then. It does get higher, back to the supply and demand thing. There's a high concentration of people going into any one place at any one time. There's going to be a higher demand for the things that people want to play with, especially if it's something like a sports game or like a big event like that. That's why Vegas is so prominent for it, because those types of things are happening all the time. So again, yeah, there's things you can do to watch out for there, but I keep going back to, it is just that the economic side of it, that's why it kind of always receives attention, because there's a larger amount of people put into any one city at any one time. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening every other day of the year.
Correct. No, that's a good point. Actually, it brings up memories for me when I was in the financial world. we had this meeting that we would go to every year in Chicago, and there was women there in the bar that were obviously soliciting, and they knew we were going to be there. Like all these financial suits were going to be there, and it's like I go to bed alone, and I'm sitting there going, how would they know? Like, how would they know that this thing's going on at this hotel in this city, as like this deep dark underworld of like scouting of where these influential and affluence is going to be, that just like most of us that are naive, I think, just don't even think about. And then all of a sudden they have a couple drinks and they end up in a precarious situation or whatever it may be, and they're participating in the trafficking world that they never would have, like you mentioned, if they had known that that person was being forced to do what they're doing.
Yeah, and I mean the guys who are, I guess, arranging it, the guys who are profiting from it, it's planning and logistics, and the guys who are making the most money are good at it, and they're running it like a proper empire, a proper business, and the girls are just commodities to them to make that money, and the guys are paying for it. But is the hard part of it as well is, I guess, we had a victim recently, and they were giving us some examples of where they would go and when they would go there and who they would go. And they were like, one of the questions that they got asked was, why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you say? And the answer was, who do we ask? Because the people in the room are politicians, they're cops, they're lawyers, they're judges. Like, who should we go to for help when these are the customers? So it's this, this is why I keep going back to the, like, let's stop them getting into it in the first place. Because if traffickers have to start, kidnapping girls off the streets and doing that more, then that's going to become very, very obvious, and we're going to know exactly who's actually in danger there. But when they're doing it still with the grooming method and getting them into it almost like they're coming in willingly, is really, really hard. I mean, if we think about last year, I believe we have 90 field units across the country for federal law. So anytime that they cross a state, it becomes a federal law. We've got 90 field units across the country. And in labor trafficking, we had 5 convictions last year. We had less than 400 sex trafficking. And there is a lot of money getting thrown into this. There's a lot of resources getting thrown into this. There's a lot of NGOs and nonprofits out there working on this. And we're getting 5 labor convictions, and we're getting less than 400 sex trafficking convictions.
And you think that that's because it goes all the way to the top?
I think because it's very, very, very hard to convict on anyway. And then when we're then dealing with corruption all the way up the line, it's not going to get where it needs to get. We're not going to be charging the people that need to be charged. And but we've got, I believe, at this point in time, 80,000 prostitutes in prison. The girls are easy to put in prison rather than focusing on the actual organized crime element of it.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the organized crime element of it, you and I had conversation about this offline, but talk about how immigration or illegal immigration has played such a role in the last few years here in the U.S. through sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess back to even what we were just saying there about the prostitution. There's 80,000 prostitutes. I believe every incarcerated individual in the US right now costs $150 per day that gets paid to private institutions. These same institutions and same owners are building detention centers on the border. During the last 4 years, we've had over 500 kids have crossed the border, and they've been put on the unaccompanied minor program, and they get handed across to their sponsor. And in some states, that sponsor doesn't even have to have proof of ID or proof of connection to the child. And then they'll take the child, and then they have to show up for their first court case. I believe there was, as of August last year, there was 30,000 plus that never showed up for the first court case. And then there was another, I think 324,000 altogether have completely gone missing. We don't know where they are. And I know that the new administration's put a lot of plans into place to get this fixed, but it really was, for want of a better term, government facilitated trafficking, that like these kids were being taken here and we don't know where they are, and nothing was done to look after them.
324,000 kids gone missing, and that was just last year.
That was over the last 4 years. There was,
The last 4 years.
500,000 across the border in the last 4 years, and there's only 176,000 that we fully know where they are and what they're doing. The rest are relatively unaccounted for.
And at the same time, we have the media telling us that these are all families coming across the border and they're seeking asylum, and we're paying for them out of FEMA dollars to be put up in luxurious hotels with our own taxpayer dollars. Wow, 324,000 kids gone missing, presumably into trafficking situations.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't just sex trafficking. A lot of the time it is labor trafficking. We're bringing them across to do incredible amount of hours of working and making clothes, making goods of any sort. And they are very, very often run by things like MS-13 and the other gangs, the cartels that position themselves here to exploit. And I get, as I say, not just sex trafficking, but labor trafficking as well. There's a hell of a lot of money to be made out of kids.
Yeah. The cartels reported that their number one profit is trafficking, not drugs anymore. But humans.
Yeah, I mean, you think about a lot of the guns that Mexico have, they're coming from the US, and then the drugs are coming across from South America, from Central America, coming across. And, if you take some drugs across the border and you get caught, you're pretty much going to jail. Like there's no doubt about it. I've already given you the stats today on trafficking. If you get caught with kids or women, it's really hard to prove or hard to get a case presented. So you're probably going to get away with it. You've got a much higher chance of getting away with trafficking women or kids than you have of ever getting convicted for it.
That's fascinating and sickening all in the same sentence. So I want to talk, before we move on to some of the leadership stuff and what you've done. The last thing I want to talk about, because you keep mentioning, is the grooming side of things, and I want to give a backdrop, because a lot of people know the term, may not fully grasp what that looks like, and so perhaps give it in the lens of what it looks like for children to be groomed, what us good Americans can do to look out for this and make sure that not only does it not happen in our own families, but to our neighbors' kids or anyone else that we may care about.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that there isn't, a lot of people believe that there's a socioeconomic background that they will target. It's not. It's a certain type of child, certain type of lifestyle that they've got. I believe that one of the, I do a lot of research onto actual predators. I've met traffickers in prison. I've met with pedophiles, and they do look at the family dynamics. So if, like, for example, if there's not a father in place, if the child spends a lot of time on their own. So this isn't about whether you're rich or poor, like just how is your lifestyle set up. So they'll be looking to select the victims based on that. Like how vulnerable is this kid? Like, do they have a strong father? Do they have communication in their household? So they're selecting them, and then they're going to secure their trust. So there's something missing in this kid's life that they're going to make sure that they can build a trust around. I'm here for you. Nobody else is here for you. I'm going to be the one that's going to help you. So that they're filling that kind of void that's missing in the kid's life. And then they want to kind of seclude them and make sure that not only are they not speaking to their parents or their family, that their friendship groups are going to be bad to them. But, nobody understands you like I do. Like, I'm just going to completely clear you from then. And then everything's about secrecy. So the child will start being a lot more secretive, hiding things, hiding phone calls, hiding their phone completely. Like, everything will become, you'll notice them just isolating themselves and clearing themselves away from anybody that they know. And then it becomes sexualized. And a lot of people say, this is where it becomes illegal. But sometimes you can sexualize a relationship without it being illegal. This is just by like the way we talk. We'll maybe put little words into our conversation that just make it a little bit more normalized, a little bit more desensitized to those words and those types of things. And then by the time you've done all that, you've pretty much gained a supremacy over them. You have all their trust, all their control, all their power. They're telling you everything. Every single part of what I've just said there is legal. Nothing is illegal until we get to the exploitation, sexual contact stage. So you can be out there, you could be grooming kids, you can be doing this. And I say kids, I say women, teenagers, like, but if we think about, I mean, there's actual influencers out there, like big named influencers that have programs that tell you how to do this, how to groom a girl into doing things for you. And it's like the 101 of grooming is build that trust, isolate them, and get them to, you're the only one, you're the one in control. And then once we've got that, then we exploit them, then we make them do the things we want them to do. But at this point, they're thinking, and they're telling other people that they're doing it because they want to. Like, no, he's not forcing me, he's not making me do it, I'm doing it because I want to. But they're completely and utterly brainwashed by this point, and you're now in it. But I always say, like, if we could stop it at that point, if we can stop it while they're being groomed, then that's the point that we could stop trafficking ever happening. But while it's still kind of legal to groom a child, I say it's legal as long as we haven't done any physical touching or exploitation. The grooming of a child is legal, and that's scary to me. I would love to see that made illegal.
Is there any country or any municipality that's doing a good job with cracking down on grooming?
We were working on it quite hard in the UK, but it didn't have the effect it was meant to have. Funnily enough, Amsterdam and some of the Netherlands, they managed to crack down on it a bit. Scotland in itself, we came out with coercive control laws, so this kind of mental play was made illegal for domestic violence, but not on the grooming side of it. But Texas, I believe, last year enforced a law that made grooming illegal. It was focused more on the kind of trans movement and the grooming of kids in that way, but it does have wording in it that you can use it to fight grooming. But one of my next big stages would be to get wording to put a bill in to make it. And I've spoken to plenty of people about it, and most people are of the opinion that grooming a child should be illegal. But I do come across the odd person who tells me that no, maybe not.
Did you say that there is big influencers that were teaching people how to do this?
Yeah, well, there's one influencer in particular who has a whole, I believe it's called the PhD program, where they basically teach you how to get women to do these things for you, and how you get them to kind of worship you and become part of your world, and then you make a shit ton of money off them, basically.
And where do I find this person and throw him in a wood chipper?
I'm sure you've seen him. I think his last time I heard from him, he was he thinks he was going to be the Prime Minister of the UK. But unfortunately for this type of influencer, he has built his brand around this whole matrix, red pill. The government's corrupt, everyone's against me. They're kind of they build their around this, a certain type of people, and then if you go against him, then you're going against that type of people. If you say anything bad about this person, then you're a complete left wokeist. So
what are you talking about?
He's the pin dropped. So he might have the odd opinion that a lot of people will agree with, but the whole time while we were agreeing with it, building it, and what we're actually doing as well with somebody like that is that there's young boys who are following him, who think that he's amazing, who are worshiping what he does, and they're learning how to treat girls based on how he's speaking and what he's saying. And then these boys are then growing to believe that, okay, well, if I want to make money, I'm just going to set up a webcam and get loads of girls to make loads of money for me. And then that's how it's continuing this cycle of porn, abuse, trafficking, making money off of women, and then we're coming further and further away from the loving, solid family relationships that people could have. More women are being abused, more boys don't know what real intimacy is anymore, and then this is how they believe that money should be made. It's quite scary.
Yeah. So that neither of us gets sued. I won't mention his name, but I know who you're talking about. And he should have remained in prison when they had him. So let's switch over. Well, actually, last thing I want to say on this, and you may have seen this study as well, but for those listening that have either engaged in pornography or anything, we mentioned the stats earlier. The one thing I want to mention, because I do nerd out on neuroscience, is that neuroscientists have proven that watching pornography, the same parts of your brain light up as being an addict to cocaine. And so it's not a healthy practice for you mentally or spiritually. And then you take the stat that Alana talked about earlier, about that it is likely that you're watching someone that is doing it against their will. You've got a lot of soul searching to do. There's a lot of evidence here to tell you that pornography is not good for you, and it is not good for the person that's engaging in it at all. So I would just throw that out there and make sure that you do some of your own soul searching and cut that practice from your life in general. Because as she stated quite eloquently earlier, is, we could drop a bomb on these cartels, but until the demand goes away, people are going to figure out a way to fulfill that demand. So, all right, let's transition into leadership, because I've wanted to ask you this because you've constantly been pushing barriers in male dominated industries, from real estate, a lot of philanthropy, businesses, security, all the different things. What advice would you have for women who want to step into a leadership role and take on those big challenges that maybe they're stepping into a male dominated industry?
Personally, I've never agreed with the kind of burning bra activism type of approach. I think if we want to achieve and we want to do amazing things, we have to just go out and do it. I know that they'll like to tell you that, it's a man's world and that you're not going to be able to be as good as men. You can't get what, like, I've never, have I struggled? Yes. Have I come across adversity because of who I am or how old I am or because I'm blonde or whatever it might be? But I've never let it phase me. I got, when I was, I guess, 25, I got a job as a bank manager, and there was two bank positions came up. There was a larger bank and a smaller bank. This other gentleman had applied for the job at the same time. Both branches came available at the same time. I got given the bigger branch. He got given the smaller branch. But I was on 10 grand a year less than him. We both had, other than age, he was slightly older than me. We both had similar experiences. But he was given more. Rather than complain and rather than go into that and say, like, I should be getting just as much as him because I'm female and he's male and it's not very fair, all I done was just went and worked, and I just showed exactly what I could do and how I could do it. And I believe about 6 months after that, the financial crash of 2008 happened, and everything was everywhere. Like, nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what was going to happen with their money. The bank was in a real mess. And this gentleman who'd taken over this other bank ended up being signed off with work-related stress. He couldn't cope with what was going on. That type of environment is exactly where I thrived in. It was great for me because it was like, okay, we're everyone's in trouble. We're in crisis. Let's get it fixed. So I ended up taking over his branch as well. So now I've got both branches, and then my salary doubled. So I'm not saying that it may be not fair, and we throw the word fair out so much, but do you know what? Life's not fair. And I think that if I've gone and just complained, I'd probably still be looking for jobs that fit me. But I didn't. I just went, showed what I could do, kept going, worked hard, and then I was given what I wanted very, very soon anyway. And then every other job that I've went into is kind of been taken with that same approach. I just prove what I can do, and that I can be good at it. And if I don't know, I'll go and learn, and I'll work hard, and I'll make it happen.
It's so good. It's been, because my entire leadership team, 90% of it was strong women when I had my financial firm. And it's interesting to me to watch some men that are threatened by strong women. And what you got to realize for you women out there is that strong men love strong women in business and in life. And if you run across a man that happens to be intimidated by your strength, you got to recognize really quickly that that's a weak man, a weak leader. And things aren't probably going to go well either romantically or in business. It's actually something I've observed over the last 20 years, and I appreciate strong women in my life. They bring such a different perspective to me and thought process and empathy and just different characteristics that I really appreciate and have helped me become so much better. And I love your advice because life isn't fair. I teach my kids that all the time and I see all these parents trying to snowplow nowadays, problems out of kids' way. So I call them the snowplow parents, and they're not equipping themselves or their kids for the real world. You can do that for your kids, but you can't do that for them as adults. In fact, like, I don't know if you've seen this trend, but Gen Z is having parents come to interviews with them. For those not on video, her jaw just dropped. But that is accurate. That is happening in corporate world where parents are showing up to interviews with their child.
Wow.
And it's crazy. They're still trying to snowplow.
Well, it's interesting because I think that you, as a parent, you want to protect your kids. Like, you can't deny that. Like, you do want to make sure they're safe and that they're looked after. But I was 15 when my mom died, and she was 37 when she passed, and I didn't get all that education from her that I could have got as a woman growing up, and I didn't learn all these different things. I had to work it out myself. And I know that in any given day that could happen to me, it could happen to Dean. The kids might not have us tomorrow. So they have to learn the basics of life. And no matter how much you want to teach them, you want to say, I want to do it for you. I want to help you. And I see you in pain and I see you struggling. Of course I want to help, but it's not helping them in the slightest if you're doing it for them. Or the thing that I hear a lot, I'm in Orange County in California, and oh no, not my kids. My kids wouldn't do that. My kids wouldn't. And it's like, no, it was your kids. So let's tell them they were wrong and teach them what to do next. One of the biggest things I have at the minute is kids are all sharing nude pictures of each other. Like, it's a huge thing right now where like 12, 13, 14-year-old kids are asking for nude selfies and sharing them around. My daughter, she's 13 and she's been in the world of trafficking with me forever. She's been learning it since she's been growing up. So she tells me these things and we talk about it. And one parent in particular, I spoke to them and I said, look, your son asked for naked pictures from a 12-year-old girl. This is what is wrong with that. This is what the law is. And her immediate response to me, my son goes to church. My son wouldn't do that. You must have the wrong person. And I was there with the evidence for her. And I said, no, he definitely has. We just need to tell them it's wrong and that, what the consequences could be if they do share it, etc., etc. But she was just like, absolutely not. She hung the phone up on me. She was like, my son wouldn't do this. She did not want to have that conversation that her son could be anything other than the angel that she perceived him to be. And to her, that's protecting her son. To me, that is just building another potential threat for the future, really.
100%. We had a situation, not like the nude situation, but there was a kid in the class and that was talking about bringing a gun and knife to the school. And the mom had text evidence. The other mom that she confronted looked at her daughter's phone and the texts were deleted. She says, see, they're not here. We're like, you can delete texts into your text on the phone. And she refused to believe it.
Well, I think it also comes back to what you were saying about trafficking. We want to believe it's not happening. We want to believe those girls are doing it of their own volition when you're watching those movies. Dean, my husband, he went to the school and offered them a school shooter package because they don't have a school shooter package at the school that our kids go to. So he offered to do some training and do some work with them. And he was like, the principal was like, no, we don't have that problem here. It's never happened here. But we do have a robust plan. It's the same plan that if we had an escaped dog or a bee outbreak. That was his response to Dean's. You can imagine Dean's response to this guy. It was like, well, a bee doesn't have an AK-47, or a dog isn't actively trying to gun down all the kids in school. Like, that doesn't work.
That's I can imagine Dean's face. So yeah, and I'm on the school safety committee too, and there has to be robust plans and there has to be preparation, unfortunately, nowadays, just like there was when we were kids and there was tornado or earthquake drills or whatever it may be. All right, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. The last couple questions I had, going back to the business aspect, and you've shown such adaptability and resilience through your career changes and all the things that you've done. What's your approach to taking risks and kind of stepping into the unknown? Because I think this is really powerful. A lot of people tend to avoid risks. They know that outside their comfort zone is where growth is created. They just can't necessarily get themselves to take that risk. What has been your approach to that?
I mean, for me, it's very simple. That life is just way too short to care. Like, you have to you're never going to, as you say, you're never going to get to the places you want to go by being safe and being comfortable. But I also think that we have this huge misconception of failure and mistakes. And, it's such a bad word to say you're failing, or you've made a mistake, or you've made an error. It's, if you're getting through your day and you haven't failed and you haven't made any mistakes, then you've not tried on that day. You've not pushed yourself outside of where you could be. It's really, really safe to sit in that comfort zone. But failure shouldn't be a dirty word. Failure should be something that we're almost, if we're failing, at least we're trying outside of what our capabilities are. But as long as we keep going, we don't just hit that first hurdle and then stop, or we fail at the first moment and then stop. We keep going, we learn the lessons, what went wrong, how could I do better? Okay, next step, let's move on. And if it is a case of, well, actually, maybe it's not for me, know that that's for the right reasons. You're not just quitting because it's got too hard. That's every single thing that we've achieved has been achieved through absolute blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, sleepless nights, all these things. I feel like I see, like, on Instagram and all these different portals, a lot of this instant achievement that people want. Oh, we can make you rich in 10 days or whatever. Like, there's no joy in that. You need that struggle. You need the build. You need the pain. You need the memories to get there, to really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. And I so much agree with it. The suffering that comes along with it is where so much of the lessons are learned, that you get to build that resiliency and build that fortitude to continue moving forward. I've seen it in my own life and I've seen it with so many others as well. All right. So last question I always ask, and this can be on anything you've spoken of or anything that just comes to your heart. But what's an unpopular belief that you hold to be true that you think most others disagree with?
I would probably say that well, we just said, really, anything's possible. Anything can be achieved. I think that most people are looking for the excuse as to why we can't do it. I firmly believe that, Josh, you said to me right now, you want to be a rocket scientist, and can you help me? I'd be like, yeah, let's go and get rocket scientists for dummies, and we'll start from day one, and then we'll get to the end. I think that there's absolutely nothing that can't be achieved in the world by anybody if you really want to do it. But we are our own selves limiting beliefs when we say we can't. So I've yet to see anything that I think that you can't do.
Yeah. So good. All right. What is we didn't even get to mention and name drop your charity, but if someone's so inclined to support the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, where can they get more information on you, the charity, and get involved?
The charity is bluerose.foundation. So, but you can find out from my website, alanastott.com, across all our social, or just get in touch with me or Dean, deanstott.com, alanastott.com. pretty much can find us through those names. But the charity in itself is Blue Rose Foundation, and you can donate, you can get involved, you can find out what you need to find out there.
Awesome. Well, it's been such an honor to have you on and share so much valuable information. I know we spent a lot of time on the human trafficking, sex trafficking piece, but it's such an important topic that's so hard for most to talk about, and you have such a vast knowledge on it. I wanted to make sure we tapped into it enough today. But thank you so much for spending the time with the audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great.
You've been awesome. All right, Spartans, you know what to do. Share this episode far and wide. Make sure we get this message out there. Remember, the good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.
This is